There's a plan quietly taking shape right now to challenge the world's most dominant currency. It's a plan that involves a ton of gold, some really cutting-edge technology, and a coalition of nations that make up over a third of the entire global economy. So today, we're going to break down the BRICS plan for a brand new world currency.
I mean, it's a huge question, right? But it's one we've absolutely got to ask. For decades, the US dollar has been the undisputed king of the hill in global finance. But is all of that about to change?
Okay, let's dive right into the evidence, because there's a lot to unpack. It all starts with the group of nations behind this massive push and the sheer economic power they already have.
All right, so first up, the challenge to the dollar. This is all about scale.
So let's talk about the BRICS nations for a second. We're talking Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Together, they are an absolute economic powerhouse. They account for more than 30% of the world's GDP. To put that in perspective, that's actually a little bit ahead of the G7. It is a huge slice of the global economic pie.
And this, right here, is the heart of the problem for them. Despite all that massive economic output, when it comes time for international trade and finance, their own currencies, they barely even make a dent. The US dollar is still king, and that creates this fundamental mismatch between their economic power and their actual financial influence on the world stage.
So you see the imbalance. That's the what. Now let's get into the why. What specific events are really driving this push for an alternative?
Well, a couple of key things have really lit a fire under this project. First off, trade between the BRICS countries themselves has just skyrocketed. That created a very real, practical need for a better way to settle all those payments. And then, boom, in 2022, the whole world watched as Russia was cut off from the SWIFT payment network. That was a really stark reminder of just how much power the dollar-based system has. And moments like that have really sped up the search for a way to operate on their own.
And listen to this quote from a key Russian official. I mean, it is just so revealing. It spells it out with perfect clarity. The goal is to build a system that can completely bypass banks and operate totally unseen by outside powers. So this isn't just about making things more efficient. This is about creating total financial independence.
So what would this new system actually look like? Well, it's a really fascinating blend of old-school assets and brand-new technology.
Okay, so the proposal basically boils down to three key things. First, it would be a digital currency, not physical bills or coins. Second, and this is crucial, it would be backed by real assets, mostly gold, to give us stability and make it trustworthy. And third, it would be built on something called distributed ledger technology, or DLT, which you might know is kind of like the blockchain that powers cryptocurrencies.
So how would it work in plain English? Well, think of it as a two-step process. First, the BRICS nations would take physical assets like their gold reserves and create digital tokens that represent them. Then, second, they'd use these tokens to settle trades instantly on a shared digital ledger. This would let them completely sidestep the traditional banking system, which, as you know, can be a complex web that makes international payments pretty slow and expensive.
And look, they've got the foundation to make this happen. Together, the BRICS nations are sitting on over 5,700 tons of gold. That is a huge and growing stockpile of the exact asset they plan to use to back this new currency.
But here's where we need some perspective. While 5,700 tons is a ton of gold, no pun intended, the G7 nations hold a combined 17,500 tons. So yeah, the BRICS ambition is backed by some serious assets, but they are definitely still playing catch-up in the global gold power balance.
So the plan is to use modern tech to build a new financial highway. But how exactly? Well, this isn't just some theory. Researchers have actually found clues pointing to the specific digital plumbing they might be looking at.
And I want to be clear, this is not just some theory floating around on the internet. Researchers who've been digging through official papers have found a really consistent pattern. High-level policy documents from BRICS itself and from its member central banks keep referencing the technology behind the cryptocurrency XRP.
The evidence trail here is pretty compelling. You have an official BRICS report that specifically cites the XRP ledger's escrow features as a technical model they're looking at. Then you have Brazil's central bank naming Ripple, the company behind XRP, in its own research papers. This isn't just a one-off mention. It shows a pattern of documented interest going back several years.
Okay, so this is a really important question here. Does all this mean BRICS is just going to hop on the public crypto bandwagon and use XRP?
Well, not so fast. While the XRP ledger's tech is a confirmed blueprint, those same documents also talk about building an in-house system. This suggests they might just build their own private version, using the same architecture but keeping complete control over who gets to use it and how.
All right, so the plan sounds ambitious, right? The tech is being explored, but, and this is a big but, this whole project is a long, long way from being a sure thing. It faces some huge hurdles, starting from inside the group itself.
On one side, you've got officials from Russia who are pushing this forward aggressively, talking like combining their digital currency systems is the obvious next move.
But then, on the other side, you hear something totally different coming out of India. India's external affairs minister has been pretty clear that their policy is not to replace the dollar and that they're focused on global stability. This shows a major split right in the heart of the BRICS alliance.
And that disagreement is just the tip of the iceberg. The list of challenges is, well, it's pretty long. We already talked about the gold gap. But on top of that, imagine the immense task of getting 5 huge, diverse nations with different political systems and different economic goals to agree on everything. And then, of course, there's the very real threat of geopolitical blowback, like potential tariffs from the US if this plan actually starts to look like a reality.
So what's the bottom line here? The takeaway is this. The desire to create an alternative to the dollar is very, very real. The research is happening, the gold is being stacked, and the technical blueprints are being studied. But the road from that ambition to an actual working reality, man, it is just paved with massive, massive challenges.
And that really leaves us with the final question. Are we looking at the early blueprint for a new, multipolar financial world where the dollar finally has a serious competitor? Or is this just a grand vision that, in the end, might be too complex and face too many hurdles to ever succeed? The answer to that is going to shape global finance for decades to come.